Hello and welcome to the video. We're going to be going over the 5-second rule by Mel Robbins. Now, usually at the beginning of the video, I'd like to tell you who this book would be great for, but honestly, I think this is a principle that almost anyone can use. Whether you're an entrepreneur trying to get more out of your workday, whether you're trying to be healthier and exercise more, whether you're just trying to get out of bed, like one of the stories that Mel Robbins tells us in the book. This book is going to be perfect for you. And now let's get into the introduction. First, I'll tell you a little bit about Mel herself. She was an award-winning CNN commentator and op-ed writer. She's a contributing editor at Success Magazine. She's a best-selling author and one of the most sought-after keynote speakers in America. She started her career as a criminal defense attorney and launched several companies and hosted TV and radio programs. She's really done quite a lot with her life. It's pretty amazing. She also has a really amazing TED Talk that I recommend you go and watch. And with that all out of the way, that's a quick introduction of Mel Robbins. Let's introduce her book and the concept of the 5-second rule. So the first quote that I pulled out of the book is, "You are about to learn something remarkable. It takes just 5 seconds to change your life." It sounds like a gimmick, doesn't it? It's not. And in fact, that's actually what I thought when I first saw this book. I thought 5-second rule, what's this going to be about? It sounds like a gimmick. But fortunately, I've seen it enough times, I've seen it recommended quite a lot, and I've watched quite a few of Mel's videos, and it's not a gimmick. It's science, like she says, and she'll prove it to you. You can change your life one 5-second decision at a time. In fact, it's the only way that you change. That's an interesting paradigm shift right there. It's the only way that you change, 5 seconds at a time. This is the true story of the 5-second rule, what it is, why it works, and how it's transformed the lives of people around the world. The rule is easy to learn and its impact is profound. It's the secret to changing anything. Once you learn the rule, you can start using it immediately. And absolutely, this book is very actionable, which is one of my favorite types of books. It's very actionable. You can take this idea and this concept of the 5-second rule and apply it to your life almost immediately. The rule will help you live, love, work, and speak with greater confidence and courage. Use it once and it'll be there for you whenever you need it. And like I said, you can use it in just your regular everyday life, your love, your work, almost in any domain that you might be looking to make a change or move towards a goal. This 5-second rule will be perfect for you. And I really look at it as a tool for habit change. Now, it's kind of a habit in and of itself, but really it's a bolt on for all the other habits that you know you should be doing. So I think that it's one of the most effective tools to help you with habit change. And it really is the how of getting yourself to do the things that you know that you should be doing, moving towards whatever goals and vision you have for yourself. But this is also the how of getting yourself to stop screwing yourself over. As Mel talks about in her TED Talk, it's actually called that, how to stop screwing yourself over. So I think that this tool can be really useful for any kind of habit change you're trying to make. So I really think that you should pick this book up. It's sure to be a classic. It's very elegantly written, and it's on such an important topic. Like I said, it's a principle that you can take and apply it in all sorts of different areas in your life, and that's my favorite kind of book. There are a lot of big ideas in the mind map, but it's for sure one that you should put on your shelf because I really think it's worth rereading it back and forth because there's a lot of stories of Mel's own life inside the book, and that can help you kind of extrapolate it and put it into your own life as well. So we'll get into the book, the 5-second rule. The first quote that I pulled out on the 5-second rule is, that's one of the things that I've learned using the 5-second rule. When it comes to goals, dreams, and changing your life, your inner wisdom is a genius. Your goal-related impulses, urges, and instincts are there to guide you. So this is a point where I'll stop and just talk about that a little bit. When it comes to your goals, dreams, and changing your life, your inner wisdom is genius. I really believe that because what ends up happening is we have these two minds inside of our head, inside of our brain. And one of them is our more logical brain. And that one ends up talking us out of these things that we know that we should be doing. But our inner wisdom and our genius has these impulses, these urges and these instincts to act on things that will help us move towards our goals. And that's the one that we should be listening to. But so often that logical brain is so powerful and we've been trained to build up this logical brain because it is very helpful in today's day and age. But that inner wisdom and that guidance that you have inside of yourself often gets shut out by this logical brain, kind of covering up these urges, impulses, and instincts. But the 5 second rule allows us to short circuit that logical brain and immediately act on this inner wisdom. I think this is a beautiful way to get yourself to more often connect with that inner wisdom. So you need to learn to bet on them, because as history proves, you'll never know when your greatest inspiration will strike and where that discovery will lead you if you trust yourself enough to act on it. So this is a lot about trusting yourself to act on your impulses. So we'll give you a couple of different examples here on how this will work. This is how some of the world's most useful inventions were discovered. In 1826, John Walker discovered the match while he was using a stick to stir a pot of chemicals, and when he tried to scrape the gob off the end, it ignited. He followed his instinct to try to recreate it, and this is how he discovered the match. Quite interesting. I actually had never heard that analogy used in a book before. In 1941, George Mastrel invented Velcro after noticing how easily cockleburrs attach to his dog fur. If you have a dog, you know exactly where that's coming from. In 1974, Art Fry got the idea for the Post-it note because he needed a bookmark that would stay put on his page in his Hymenau until Sunday's church service, but that would not damage the pages when he removed it. That's even how the Frappuccino was born. Interesting analogy again. In 1992, an assistant manager at Starbucks in Santa Monica noticed that the sales dropped whenever it was hot outside. He had an instinct to make a frozen drink, and he followed it, asking for a blender, tinkering with recipes, and giving the vice president a sample. The first Frappuccino rolled out in his store a year later. So this is very interesting, and you can see why Mel has been so accomplished throughout her life using some of these different things. She's started so many different businesses, and she's really just following those impulses, right? We'll talk about this a little bit in the story a little bit later, how she didn't really understand the 5 second rule until a little bit later, but man, she has kind of been living it her whole entire life. So when it comes to change, goals, and dreams, you have to bet on yourself. The bet starts with hearing the instinct to change and honoring that instinct with action. I feel so thankful that I listened to that dumb idea about launching myself out of bed like a rocket, because everything in my life has changed as a result. We'll talk a little bit more about this experience later. Here's what happened. The next morning, the alarm clock rang at 6 a.m., and the first thing I felt was dread. It was dark, it was cold, it was winter in Boston, and I did not want to wake up. I thought about the rocket launch, and I immediately felt like it was stupid. So she had this idea, and she felt like it was stupid. This is going to be a common reoccurring theme here. Then I did something I have never done before. I ignored how I felt. I didn't think. I did what was needed to be done. Very interesting, right? So her inner wisdom, her inner genius might have known, okay, I need to get up. This is what needs to be done if I'm moving towards my goal. But instead, that logical brain that we talked about before was telling her all these things. It was cold. It was dark. It was winter in Boston. You know, I didn't want to do any of this stuff, and she felt like this idea that she had was stupid. She didn't want to, but instead she didn't think, and she just did what needed to be done. So instead of hitting the snooze button, I started counting backwards: 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then I stood up. That was the moment I discovered the 5 second rule, and you can see exactly how the 5 second rule is in action in that specific example that she gives from the book. So the first point that I made here is about discovery. So Mel discovered the 5 second rule when she wasn't feeling so great. Obviously, she was having some trouble getting into bed, but she was also 41 and unhappy in her marriage, struggling with finances, and probably drinking a little bit too much. Every morning, she dreaded getting out of bed and hit the snooze buttons, often so many times that her kids sometimes missed the bus. How many of us have a similar experience to that? I know at certain points in my life, I definitely had trouble getting up when I knew I needed to get up. Then one night, she saw a TV commercial with a countdown: 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off. And that's when she decided that the next morning she would blast herself out of bed like a rocket. Very interesting where the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 came from. And it worked. And obviously, in the example that she gave us here, it was a silly idea at first. Even her brain, her logical brain, even thought that it was stupid, but it led to something pretty extraordinary. So let's talk about the definition of the 5 second rule just to get us a little bit more acquainted. The moment that you have an instinct to act on a goal, you must 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then physically move, or your brain will stop you. Your logical brain will stop you. And so this, again, it technically is a habit in and of itself, but it's kind of like a meta habit, or a habit that can be used as a tool on all other sorts of habits. So it's a very good habit to learn. So in my definition here, it's the brain is really built to conserve energy, and specifically that logical part of the brain is more about conserving energy and fear of failure and etc. Some things that we'll talk about later. But that's one of the reasons why making any real change can feel so hard. When you're trying to change any of your habits, it can be very difficult because your brain doesn't want to expend more energy than it feels like it needs to stay at the status quo. Because of this, we often talk ourselves out of doing things that we know we should do to move our goals. And again, that's the logical brain talking you out of it. The 5-second rule is this beautiful little tool that just helps us short circuit that logical brain, that logical part of your mind, and act on your better instincts. And that's why I think this tool is so important. Is it doesn't make us do things that we know we shouldn't do, or it doesn't help us build habits that we don't think are possible for us. But what it does do is every time we have an impulse to do something good for ourselves, no matter what it is, it helps us act on that instinct. And that's really the important part, right? You can have all of these amazing, great instincts, and you can see yourself as a healthy person, and etc. You can have all these amazing goals for yourself and amazing habits that you're trying to create. But if you can't actually get yourself to act on them, what good are they, right? They're as good as a scrap piece of paper. So how I'm using this right now, just to give you guys a quick example of how you can use it for something just so seemingly meaningless, but ultimately will be very important throughout at least the compound effect, a video that I've done before, and I'll leave a link for down below, is getting up from my desk. So I sit at my desk and I do these mind map videos. So these mind map videos can take anywhere from 4 to 5 hours to create, between reading the book and doing the mind map and then making the video. And really, it takes quite a lot of time. And I sit at a desk more than I would like to. So what I've ended up doing is buying a standing desk is the first thing that I tried to do. And I tried to change everything at the environment level. Well, what I found was that I haven't been using my standing desk as much as I wish I would be. So other than this, I really exercise, I eat healthy, I really do all the things outside of my work period, which is probably 6.5 to 8 hours long in a day. But really, sitting is the new smoking, and I'm feeling it catching up to me even as a young person. My back is a little bit tighter than I feel it should be. My hips are a little bit tighter than I feel they should be. And I'm just starting to feel some of the effects of this constant sitting that I'm doing. So what I wanted to do is stand up and move around more during the day. Some of you guys might be on the same path as me. So this is what I practiced the 5-second rule with. I physically want to stand up more often. I want to stretch. I want to move. And I just wasn't doing it. I knew I should be. I wanted to do it, and I just wasn't doing it. So anytime that I get the impulse to put my standing desk into standing mode, or to go and stretch, or even just move around, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off. And it absolutely has helped me act on my better impulse to move during the day than I would than I was, even though I had changed my environment to lead me to be more active during the day. It's very interesting. It's just a tool that you can use in order to help yourself act on those better impulses that you have. And it has been working wonderfully for me. So the next big idea, or the next point that I wanted to make, was about the long game. So we'll talk a little bit about this in the first quote. To play any game, you have to start. To win, you'll need to keep going. And if you want to make your dreams come true, get ready for the long game. So many books on habits and etc. have talked about this. This is The Slight Edge, this is The Compound Effect, all of those great and wonderful works. She continues on and says that life is not one and done sort of deal. You've got to work for what you want, right? So here's some more great examples and analogies that she gives us. Do you know the game Angry Birds? Rovio, the brand that created the game, launched 51 unsuccessful games before they developed Angry Birds. And it's not like unsuccessful games are easy to create. 51 unsuccessful games is probably thousands and thousands of man hours to create those. Probably, hundreds of thousands of dollars to create those. How about the Avenger star Mark Ruffalo, the Hulk? Do you know how many auditions he did before he landed his first role? Almost 600 auditions. That's a lot of times that you are striking out. She says that even Babe Ruth struck out 1,300 times. And my favorite vacuum cleaner is Dyson. And there's no wonder why it doesn't suck at sucking up dirt. James Dyson created 5,127 prototypes. That's so many prototypes of vacuums. And the last one will blow your mind. Picasso created nearly 100 masterpieces, which is a lot of art. He's one of the most prolific artists ever. But what most people don't know is that he created a total of more than 50,000 works of art. So did you see that last number, 50,000? That's 2 pieces of art a day. 2 pieces of art a day, which is crazy. Success is a numbers game, and you're not going to win if you keep telling yourself to wait. The more often that you choose courage, the more often you're likely to succeed. So courage, that's going to be a very important word for the rest of our mind map here. But courage is a very important word. Why would you need courage in order to create all of those amazing things that all of those, very successful people created? Why would you need it? Well, it's because of failure. Fear of failure is one of the most common reasons that we don't act on those better impulses that the 5-second rule is trying to get us to act on. But failure, to me, is really just an illusion, right? The people that are listed above are looked at as some of the most successful people to have ever lived on this earth. And even they failed more than they succeeded. Absolutely. Even they failed more than they succeeded. And we have to look at failure not as a stopping point, but a learning point. And that's what's very, very important to think about when it comes to doing the 5-second rule and committing to the long game. Now we'll move on to everyday courage. And this is a concept, again, from the book, The 5-Second Rule. I really love this concept. I don't think I've ever heard it put quite this way before, but it really resonated with me, and I hope it does with you as well. Overcoming failure takes something that Mel calls everyday courage. Another beautifully simple concept, I said. Everyday courage is the courage that it takes to be committed to the long game. And what does that mean? The courage it takes to do the small things every day that move you towards your goal. Again, compound effect and the slight edge are both very, very important concepts here to think about when it comes to actually accomplishing anything. It's the courage that it takes to act on your better impulses. So it's not, the courage to go and present in front of a bunch of people. It's maybe the courage to get up at 6 a.m. like Mel was talking about. It's those small things that you do every day that seem insignificant, but you need to do 2 things. You need to commit to the long term, or the long game, as I say in the mind map. And then you also need to have the courage to continually act on those small things, even when they're hard, even when you don't want to. So how can you show a little bit of everyday courage today? So say, for example, you want to go to the gym, but you don't quite have the courage to do it, and you haven't been doing it as frequently as you want to. Can you show that little bit of everyday courage today to show that you're committed to the long game? And continually show that everyday courage to show up at the gym, 6 a.m., 7 a.m., whenever you want to get there, and continually show up every single day and continue to have that courage every single day. It's a very amazing concept, that everyday courage in the long game. The next part is something that I think a lot of you guys are going to benefit from. I absolutely benefit from this. I've been thinking this way for quite a while, but she definitely articulates it very well. And that's excitement or anxiety. So which of these 2 are you feeling? And the answer might surprise you here. So I first used this reframing strategy, she says in the book. I first used this reframing strategy as a public speaker. I got a lot of questions about public speaking, and specifically, how did I get over my fears and nerves about public speaking? It's a very common thing for people to be nervous about public speaking. My answers always surprise people. I have never gotten over my fears and nerves. I just use them to my advantage. Now, she's one of the most sought after keynote speakers ever, and she's never got over her fear of public speaking. Very interesting. I speak for a living, like a lot. In 2016, I was named the most booked female speaker in America. 98 keynotes in a single year. 98 in a year. That's almost 2 a week. That's amazing. Do I get nervous? Absolutely. Every single time. So she gets nervous every single time she does a keynote. But here's the trick. I don't call it nerves. I call it excitement. Because physiologically, anxiety and excitement are exactly the same thing. Let me say that again. Fear and excitement are the exact same thing in your body. The only difference between the excitement and anxiety is what your mind calls it. And we're going to talk a little bit about reframing coming up next, but physiologically, hormonally, neurochemically, all of that stuff, fear and anxiety are both one and the same. They're not any different. Your body is reacting the same way to both of these two things. The first time that I ever really gave a legitimate speech was at that TEDx talk in San Francisco. That's a really big TEDx talk. I remember standing backstage listening to one PhD after another PhD give their talks, thinking to myself, this is the dumbest thing I've ever gotten myself into. I'm going to sound like a complete moron compared to these smart people. And I'm sure you guys can put yourself in her shoes here as well. If you've ever been a part of any kind of public speaking, or even you could imagine yourself doing public speaking, that would be very difficult. PhDs, people that are very, very smart on a particular subject, and she doesn't necessarily have a PhD, that could be very, very anxiety provoking. She says, my palms were sweaty, my heart was racing, my face was hot, my armpits were dripping like Niagara Falls, very descriptive. My body was preparing itself for action. It was getting ready to do something, but I told myself that I was nervous. So she told herself that she was nervous. That's the reframing that we'll talk about later. I labeled all those sensations as a sign that something bad was about to happen, and then the nerves got worse. Want to know something wild? 6 years and hundreds of speeches later, I still feel that exact same thing in my body backstage. So her palms are sweating, her heart's racing, her face gets hot, and her armpits are still dripping like Niagara Falls, like she said. Physiologically, I'm in a state of arousal. I'm about to go into action, and my body is getting ready. I feel the exact same thing as fear. I just channel it in a positive direction. So you can see the two different scenarios here. First one, she said that she was anxious. She was nervous, and her nerves actually got worse. And then after that, she went through and she actually did so many speeches that she started reframing, like we'll talk about a little bit later, to this as I'm about to go into action and my body is getting ready. That's a beautiful reframing that she did there. So let's talk a little bit about that reframing. What is reframing? What does it mean? So basically it's a reframing technique that Mel is teaching us here. Instead of I'm anxious, think I'm excited. And this is a perfect place to talk about Dr. Shad Helmstetter and what to say when you talk to yourself. Your mind simply believes what you tell it the most. And using this technique to reframe your anxiety is very, very powerful. Say it aloud, you can say it in your head. Anytime you feel anxious, you can begin to know that anxiety is just really excitement. And we'll talk a little bit more about excitement here as well. What is excitement really? It's a state where you're getting ready to perform at your absolute best. And why wouldn't your body give you all the symptoms of anxiety? An increased pulse and blood flow, an increased awareness, and a single-minded focus on the task at hand. All of those things are good things, and they help you perform. But when we see them as anxiety, they suddenly become negatives. It's very interesting that once you start reframing anxiety as excitement, you can start to see, wow, these things are really just my body priming me to help me take action and perform at my top level. Next, we'll talk about distraction. So to me, distraction is a very important concept. And after reading Deep Work by Cal Newport and Flow by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, I've taken some serious action to get distraction out of my life as much as possible. I'll tell you a little bit about that at the end of this bullet point here, but let's start off with Mel's quote. Managing distractions is like following through on health goals. You're never going to feel like it. You just have to make yourself do it. You already know that being addicted to your phone, texting, and answering emails is a distraction, but stopping it feels almost impossible. Put your hand up if you absolutely feel like it's totally impossible to stop being addicted to all of those different things that she's talking about. Absolutely. I know I did before I read some of the research on why it's so important. Even though you know you should turn off pop-up alerts and silence your phone and stop checking email every 5 minutes, this knowledge doesn't change your behavior. I could bury you with research. This is very interesting. I could bury you with research about how bad this is, but it wouldn't change your behavior. And this is where the 5-second rule comes into play. You don't have to want to do it. You just have to push yourself to do it. It's very interesting, right? The 5-second rule is really getting you past the wanting to do things. And as soon as you have that impulse to put your phone down, put it on silent, or whatever it is, you do it, as opposed to letting yourself talk yourself out of it. First, you must decide that distractions are not good. And I mean, we can all kind of see the research and all that sort of thing about why distractions are not good, how they're really ruining your life. And interruptions of any sort are really the kiss of death for your productivity. Research shows that open office spaces are a nightmare for focus. Checking email can become an addiction because of what behavior researchers call random rewards. You have to decide that your goals are simply more important than push notifications. It's that simple. You have to decide that your goals are more important than push notifications. Absolutely. Then you just remove them. Seems pretty simple, right? I'm not claiming that this is rocket science, but I'm also not going to tell you that it's easy. But I promise that if you use the 5-second rule, you'll actually do it. So this is one of the applications that she's telling you that you can use for the 5-second rule. I'd suggest that you give this one a try if you can. So here's death by distraction. What's up with this? There are so many distractions in today's modern environment. I totally believe this. You got your phone, you got social media, you got your YouTube potentially, and other people's problems is another big one that people fall into, is trying to solve other people's problems when they really should be looking at themselves. This wouldn't be a problem if our minds weren't wired specifically to be looking for these distractions, and Cal Newport talks about that in his book. What if our minds were wired specifically for deep work? He also talks about that, how to make yourself wired for deep work. What if we only craved focusing on one thing until completion? I personally believe that it's possible to rewire your brain to crave that type of focus through the power of deep work and flow. And this is really my story here with these mind maps, is rewiring my brain from distraction. Some of you might know that I actually had a social media company and still, to a certain extent, run that social media company before I created these mind maps. And I was absolutely in this state of addiction to distraction, continually checking my email, continually checking the social media feeds of myself and also all of my clients. So these specific mind maps and reading these books was my attempt to help myself get back into the flow state and crave being in flow rather than craving distraction. Flow states, to me, are the most enjoyable thing for human beings. And actually, if you're accustomed to flow states, you really crave them. So when I'm not making these mind maps, when I'm not making these YouTube videos, when I'm not reading these books, I seriously don't feel as good as if I am making them. And I've really become addicted to creating them. And it's a great thing because, it's an addiction, but obviously I could stop it if I wanted to, but it's a good addiction. It's a positive addiction. I'm addicted to creating this amazing platform and these amazing videos for you guys. It's my favorite thing to do. Like, seriously, even some of the times, I have other things that I like to do outside of work as far as hobbies go and social interactions, but sometimes I really wish I was doing these things. And it might seem crazy to some people that I wish I was doing work, but really I think that it can get to that point. And of course, the most successful people that we've talked about before are likely doing exactly this. So what should you do? Mel says that you need to remove distractions, and I totally agree. I'll tell you exactly how I did it. First, I turned on restrictions on my phone, and I gave someone else the password. So I turned off all my apps, all my downloading of apps, all of that stuff. The only thing I have on my phone is music and voice notes for my affirmations. And I gave my girlfriend the password, and I cannot download new apps on my phone or, anything on my phone really other than text messaging and phone calls if my girlfriend doesn't give me the password. And she's at work all day long, so there's no possibility of me getting distracted during the middle of the day. And then I turned my phone onto grayscale, so it's not as enticing, because I found even when I disabled all of my apps and etc., that I was still craving this distraction of the phone, and that the color actually made it more distraction and more enticing. I put an app blocker on my browser for my distraction website, so YouTube, social media, email. I only allow myself to have that for about 2 hours a day to get all that work done inside of that 2 hours. So what other things could you do? What things might help you stay away from distraction? But other than just getting away from distraction, I believe that you need to feed your mind something. So learn to feed it deep work and flow states and make it crave those conditions. And that'll help you push your skills to their limits. I really believe that you need to replace this distraction with deep work and teaching your brain how to accomplish these states of deep flow that really are going to lead to your success long term. Now, the final point here that we're going to make is revealing your greatness. She says that yes, you can move mountains. Whatever is happening right now, this is it. This is your life. And it's not going to begin again. You can't change the past, but in 5 seconds, you can change the future. So important. Got to remember that this is a finite experience that we're having right now. That's the power of everyday courage. When your heart speaks, honor it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and move. One moment of courage can change your day. One day can change your life, and your life can change the world. There is greatness in you. The time to reveal it is now. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and go. So it's a very simple concept, revealing your greatness and using the 5-second rule. 5-second rule is great. I think it's great because it's such a simple concept, but it can be applied to so many different areas. I call that a principle. But as Mel shows in this quote, it really does have exponential effects. Again, some of the other books that I recommend on using exponential thinking to help guide you along your path towards success, the compound effect and the slight edge. One moment can change your day, absolutely. One day can change your life, and then one life can change the world. I love that. That's very powerful. And with that, I'm going to leave you with the 5-second rule by Mel Robbins. I recommend you pick up the book, and if you want some more information on some of the things that I'm doing, there's tons more videos on this channel, and also my self-coaching course is just being released around this time of this video creation. So if you're interested in that, click one of the links down below. Thanks for being with me, and I'll see you in the next video.